Good afternoon. This is Giles Edwards from 366 Weird Movies, sitting down with a number of the crew from All Jacked Up and Full of Worms, which had its international debut yesterday evening. And we will start to...
World premiere.
I said international, Kayla.
Oh, sorry.
The international world premiere of All Jacked Up and Full of Worms. And starting to my left, if you'd care to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Ben Gojer. I am a producer and I did all of the special effects and worm effects on All Jacked Up and Full of Worms. And a part of the process I really enjoyed was figuring out how we could get everybody to ingest and expel worms for the movie. So I started off by snorting some worms myself. To see that it could be done, and then getting Alex to eat some worms with me and snort some worms with me. And then for expelling, that was a long journey to figure out, because I had I made vomit rigs before, but getting them to have solid worms in them was a physics challenge. So I had a lot of iterations of the worm cannons.
My name is Alex Phillips. I wrote and directed the movie All Jacked Up and Full of Worms. I've lived with this movie for like 3 or 4 years. So, from like writing it and now, really the world premiere here at Fantasia. So, I would say that this is definitely one of the high points of the process. This is the first audience we've ever showed the movie to, so no one has seen it besides basically us and now you and everyone who's sort of jumped on just by being a part of the festival. We our programmer Celia Pouzette, is that how you pronounce her last name? Yeah, great. When she basically, I reached out to her because she had programmed one of my shorts, Who's a Good Boy, and then for Court Made Trash, like a short but trash in Belgium, and then she just like watched Worms and fell in love with it, and that's just like basically changed the whole project's trajectory and life. And we found like sales out of it and distribution and stuff, and it's so the Worms have really like crawled up from where we started all together, with this really like this personal and really strange story that we all just like committed our whole lives to for a couple of years, and now to see it worm its way up into into everyone's hearts worldwide is really actually really humbling. Honestly, it's couldn't hope for a better outcome. So I guess that's my favorite part of the process.
I'm Troy Lewis, the film editor. I guess I'm gonna go back. One of my funnest memories is just like my first kind of exposure to this crazy world Alex created, and Ben's crazy worm effects, and like the beautiful footage I worked with from the DP Durango. But just definitely like this world this whole team created, and just being able to dive into that footage, like trade film references with Alex when we first started working together, and just really getting on the same page was really fun.
Yeah, Troy was great like that, where like it was I don't know, it's really hard to trust somebody with because an editor also helps tell the story, brings clarity to the story, and it takes a lot of trust and like communication.
You're having someone assemble your thoughts.
Yeah, and be able for them to understand what the hell you're talking about, especially if your thoughts are like mine or like how I was intending for the film, and finding a collaborator in Troy who like, I don't know, we love the same movie.
Yeah.
We understood what the hell the other one was saying, so it made it easy to like sit in a dark room for literally like a year with the movie to like grow it from itself into what it is now.
Wonderful. Now, one of the reasons for this first-time exercise for me, having you fellows introduce yourselves and a fond memory of what you got up to, is that there is a lot of id going on with your movie.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing that discussing it on a narrative level would mostly be just a sort of sequencing events that, you know, people should, you know, see on their own, and how, you know, it's assembled, how the effects are pulled off, and of course, you know, the story of sorts that or the parallel stories that you as the director are trying to tell. And the other reason I opted for this was I figured it'd eat up a decent amount of time and maybe give me a moment to think of further questions, because not only did I come here late, I came here a bit less prepared than I might have preferred to do. But a leaping off point here is, you two, do you watch movies with these people, or no? How do you know editor?
Well, we all went to Northwestern and know each other through that scene. And I met Alex working on a movie for Spencer Parsons that our professor made. And I like weird movies too. So yeah, I like watching weird movies with these guys.
Sign of very good taste, I have no doubt.
Yeah.
So you guys are all of similar minds for entertainment.
Yeah.
What one movie would you say tipped you into the field of pursuing not just watching weird movies, but also making them? Like, what was a gateway film for you?
Oh, man. Well, Spencer had me watch Society, and I love Screaming Mad George's work. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, what tipped me into weird movies, I honestly, one of maybe, this is maybe more than you're asking for, but I don't know the difference between a weird movie and a not weird one. Like, I like watching blockbusters, but seeing why they're weird. You know, like what the voice is there, and what people are talking about with, besides necessarily like the plot that's on the front of the film. So I think all movies are weird. And then just wanting it to get into, you know, if they're not weird, then I don't think they're any good at all. So that's pretty much it. I don't know, the movie that, I guess what I always take with me is thinking about, like, just John Cassavetes as the, like, you know, the OG of making, you know, independent film in the United States. And, like, you know, like, he was a movie star, and he had all these amazing crew people to work for him. So it's like basically impossible to even imitate, but just like seeing that as the beginning of indie film in the United States, and then wanting to learn from him, you know, and everybody else since.
No, and like kind of relating to Fantasia, something I saw in college, or like it was a documentary playing before the Worms premiere on this director Jean Rollin. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
Jean Rollin.
Jean Rollin.
Yeah.
And like I think I saw one of his films, Lips of Blood, in the Music Box Theater in Chicago, and it's just like it's definitely like this weirdness in this low budget realm and built entirely on dream logic. And then also just like back to when first discussing movies of Alex, like Cassavetes and Frownland, it's just like, you're approaching this movie from a very human, character-based level, which was cool and like really helpful during editing.
Yeah, put people in extreme situations, but have them be humans in them is the intention. You know, people doing crazy things.
Yeah, that certainly happens in your film. As I saw it, there were two main characters. There's Roscoe, and there was Benny.
Yeah.
Two very different individuals. One is a ball of tension, or so we observe him. That would be Benny starting things off. And the other is Roscoe, who, until, I want to say even the final act, seems utterly unflappable. Like, able to maneuver through everything, and it just sort of, you know, like his, I loved his reaction a number of times he had when, you know, someone would declare something as such. I said, oh, is it? Like, you know, not like dismissively, but really just genuinely curious that what this other person's observing, and what Roscoe generally is interpreting as well, is perhaps worth more attention, or even perhaps even being dismissible as something that's not as important. And I'm just wondering where those two characters came from, since the movie kind of rides on them and how they come together in a number of ways.
Yeah, the structure is like them meeting and and then going apart and then coming back, and like it's sort of it's almost like a will they won't they, or I don't know. But it is. Yeah. I think your read on Roscoe is right though. Like Philip Andre Botello plays Roscoe, and he's great to work with, and like game for everything that he went through. And yeah, you sort of see him start to like he gets like increasingly sweatier and sweatier throughout the film, and I think I read his personally. I mean, I can't tell you how to read it, but I read his response to like people saying like, "Is it cool?" They're talking about like this weird bloodletting sex act that his roommate's doing with his girlfriend, and he's like, is that cool? Like, are you why? To me, I see him as there's a processing going on. It's not necessarily just like a dismiss. It's not dismissive to me. It's more just like he's internalizing it, and then it's like sort of building inside of him, and that's why he sort of gets shakier and sweatier, and then once he finally cracks when he's like kidnapped and like starts committing acts of violence and stuff, that to me is because of all those things getting added on top of his character. He no longer is unflappable. He's all of that internalization is now being externalized.
One of the dangers of doing that, granted, I'll say that's generally a good practice to try to think things through as opposed to immediately react. I'm going to say Benny, and I guess pretty much everyone else in the movie, and also most people in real life. But to segue slightly, you having mentioned internalizing, there's one question I had for you, which don't give away any trade secrets if you don't want to. But you talked about various types of worm ingestion that you two tried out. Would you be able to give a broad stroke recipe for what your concoctions were made of when you were trying these? Since I'm going to hope they were non-toxic.
Yeah, they were non-toxic. It was all food products for stuff that people could eat on set. Like for anything that an actor had to ingest on screen, stuff made with food. Everything was totally food safe.
Yeah, we found a recipe. Can we tell them? Let it out?
It's fine with me.
Yeah. But you made Jello worms, or most of the worms were Jello.
We had different types on set of different. I had like 3 different kinds of worms that could serve different purposes on set. But for ones that people would eat, that was Jello worms. It was just Jello, and milk makes it more opaque. And then we would crumble up cookies like Oreos to make dirt. Yeah, and you dress them up like that.
Well, that explains the eaten ones. How did your lungs handle whatever it you
just
snorted?
You get like a
drip.
nasal drip.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's kind of nice and fruity.
Yeah, Jello drip.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, because I was kind of curious about that because you did mention the 3 varieties of.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of those in the movie.
Yeah.
Tons of them. Yeah.
And you mentioned last night that unfortunately one did not survive. I was curious. Would you be comfortable elaborating on the nature of its passing?
Yeah. So it's the one in. I don't know. It's a little sad now. It's actually it seems because there's actually one. It sort of humanizes the worm. Whereas usually people aren't thinking about the worms, but I guess the whole movie is thinking about the worms. The one that's hanging from a hook, that's sort of dangling in front of Roscoe when he's sort of he's hallucinating that he's on TV talking to TV, and this little girl has a fishing line with a worm on it, and that worm was our last day of shooting, and that's the worm that passed. It's the only one that passed. Yeah.
I trust it was dealt with in a appropriately solemn manner afterwards.
It was. It really affected Ben. Actually, Ben was sad, and we buried it
to the dirt.
To the dirt. Yeah.
That cycle that's explained somewhere in the movie there. Yeah, it's a good. Glad you mentioned that. Jogging some memories on my part. There's this guy on the TV. He shows up, and I think he also shows up through a hotel window or something. It wasn't terribly clear. Seemed born-again Christian, having dabbled in ill things in the past. I hate to ask this so broadly, but what's up with that guy? Where did that guy come? How did that guy come to you? I understand. I can see what he does within the story as a almost an occasional locus of getting back to while his spiel is building up, the rest of the movie is building up. So as a hook or a tool for the story, I get that, but I'm just trying to figure if he's based on any particular person or type.
Well, so Angelo is actually the name of my grandfather who lives in Greece, and when I was writing like this opening monologue for, it's gonna be really funny if my poo ever watches this movie. Anyways, but so anyways, Angelo's his name, and I wanted to like work in. He talks about like the Albanian countryside and like. I don't know. I was just trying to work in that sort of mysticism, for lack of a better word, and then also like thinking about. I kind of grew up around a lot of fundamentalist Christian type of ideology, and then just sort of seeing how that mutates, in this horror way. So yeah, his character is sort of meant to be. There's like a hallucinatory TV version that you sort of see and witness and experience via worms, and then there's also like his more tangible physical one, which is when he's like a guy who's running this sex motel, a pimp guy who's like, you got my best girl pregnant, like this is him, in reality. And then there's the one, when you're on your worms trip, in your head.
Okay, yeah, and of course, with that, obviously, to further go into the religion, there was the semi-immaculate conception issue that you also addressed within that, with
yes,
the prostitute that is, not to say that this movie has any non-interesting characters, because with the cast of about 8 or so distinct people, I want to say, and everyone's got their own thing going on. But the prostitute stood out because, for me, she was interesting in 2 ways. Interesting in that, okay, she seemed actually the most normal person here.
Yeah.
While simultaneously being the very first person you notice doing anything with the worms. In their opening montage, which I describe in my review as setting it up like it's going to be an ensemble comedy, you see her segment, she's in the crummy motel watching TV, smoking cigarettes with an ashtray full of worms.
Yeah.
There's probably any amount of depth to that or not, depending upon how...
well, so like my favorite part of the film is like the sort of secret love story in the middle of it, in the middle of like a body horror movie that's also like absurdist comedy. But Eva Fellows, who plays Henrietta, who's this sex worker, she... I think there's a lot of worminess that comes with like love, and a lot of worminess that comes with, trusting people with their bodies and also with their like hearts and minds. And I think that's kind of, it's sort of like the worms grow out of a relationship. That's how it happens. I think in the film it's physicalized, where she's talking to Benny and she presents him with these worms, and that's sort of like. How it starts being explored.
Yeah, that was another thing I quite enjoyed. For the first third, or maybe a little more, it was difficult for me to tell whether or not taking worms was actually a thing. There were people talking about it increasingly, but it wasn't until well into the movie that it really established itself as, okay, this is actually a drug. As opposed to just, from the get-go, it's like, oh, they're just kind of being, certainly a little creepy. What are they possibly getting out of this? And then we have that very fun, warm, moving scene on Benny's scooter that is just a beautiful, beautiful high point. And congratulations, by the way, on getting that into the that ending up in the Fantasia intro thing. I always like to see by the end of the festival how many of those clips I recognize. So it was, rear projection looks really cool. Okay. I was I reviewed for a while now, but I think on purpose kept my ignorance of the actual production side of things very high, because I'm more than happy to just fall into a story.
Cool.
Which actually, a question for you, Troy, as an editor. That is not an uncommon vocation, but also not a likely one. I was wondering what might have brought you into that field.
Yeah, I started out like when we were going to school together. I was like doing film, but also like an English major. So I'd always been interested in like writing and screenwriting, and kind of like during school kind of fell more into like set and production stuff and like different. We were trying all kinds of different jobs and stuff, and then like kind of felt like editing was the closest to writing, and so I've done more. That's been fun, and like. Just like specifically, I've realized like sometimes like I've done some documentary work also, and that's like very much like literally writing a story and rewriting and building that. And then like Worms, also working with Alex, I felt like we were kind of like, especially with a film with such dream logic, it was really just like writing, rewriting, and like just working like even like very minusculely on pieces of dialogue and scene structure. So that was it was just a really fun. So I definitely think like. Yeah, definitely editing is writing to me.
Yeah, to get into go from one character's head into another character's head is like, you can say it, but also to make it functional is another thing, which it takes, real technician and real help from somebody who understands what the hell we're trying to do.
Constantly bouncing ideas off each other, and trying, just spend a year experimenting with the film.
Troy we were in the same post-production class in school, and Troy was the only person who I was like, oh, you're doing something that you're weirder than me.
It's fun to try stuff. Yeah.
So that's post-production. You, I imagine, were primarily involved in pre-production, being that this is almost exclusively practical effects, I'm guessing, if not entirely.
Yeah, there's a little bit of VFX, but not a ton. Yeah,
we're gonna put a little sauce on it, just because why wouldn't you? You know.
Why wouldn't you? So that's a great point. And what? You obviously you must be mechanically inclined to have started.
Yeah.
In this, what was it that like Troy here? Briefly, your development into the special effects field.
Sure. Well, I come from a theater background. I acted for a long time, and but I also was always really bookish growing up. I was like a good student into math and science and all that stuff, and I was acting at college actually, but I wish I could just live forever so I could do everything, because I have a love for so many different things about being alive, and I started writing things and directing things, and I was a director of a theater company in college, and we weren't very popular, so I would fill all these holes in the production team to do whatever had to get done to get the show done. So I got into sound design, lighting design. I was interested in movies, and then I got real depressed in college after I just was real depressed, and I went into a basement and just started making puppets for a while, like out of trash and tree branches and stuff, because that was something I could do. I was very scared of the world and people and stuff, and it was something I could do by myself but still create. And I got into puppetry, and Spencer Parsons, who I mentioned before, a film professor, I was in a class with him. I was acting in the movie. I had to do some basic makeup effects on myself to be like a ghost, and he recognized some natural talent in me for doing that, and then invited me to do more of that work with him to make like indie movies with him. So then I got some resources from him and started taking classes eventually on like the Stan Winston School for Character Arts online, and learning how to make things with my hands. And I was inspired by bread and puppet theater for a while. I made these big larger than life like paper mache puppets, and I just sort of found a niche, and people kept asking me to do it, and I found that it was a way that it's always something different that I'm making, and I have a very active curiosity, so it was a way for me to explore like being alive by making different things. And so like influences like H.R. Giger was a big influence, and like the art of Zdzisław Beksiński, the Polish painter, that was a big influence on me. And Hannah Comstock is a monster illustrator who works with a lot of symmetry that's really beautiful and outlandish. Nathan Reed is another person I really like, and so just finding a way that I could keep making things with my friends, and puppetry, like the Worm King puppet in the movie, it's a way I can express myself, but I keep finding myself having to make things with my hands, but it's a way that I can tell a story and be connected.
Oh, great. Actually, another nice segue here. Anyone who watches, and hopefully many people will, this movie will see a number of direct influences. Obviously, you can't make a body horror these days without the name Cronenberg coming up.
Totally.
I like to think that maybe he didn't invent it, he just made it cool, but I can't think of anyone before him. So you mentioned last night, Cronenberg specifically, Naked Lunch, which, the unfilmable novel that, he put this construct around and was able to, I think, bring the tenor of that work to the screen without necessarily following it impossibly word for word as it jumped around. Were there any other influences or nods? I think I saw one.
Yeah, I really like Frank Henenlotter. He made this movie, Brain Damage, Basket Case, Bad Biology, Frankenhooker. Those are like, that movie, Brain Damage is totally like a major influence, and I think that counts as body horror, right? Yeah. I think there's even a part with worms where he's like eating spaghetti. They have brains in them. No, it's not worms. It's brains. Beating brains. Anyways, yeah, he was a major influence. Love his stuff. Just because he's also working with a similar budget, like Cronenberg has Hollywood budgets, whereas Henenlotter was making movies for nothing really. So knowing the types of stories he's telling and how he's using cool effects to be metaphor in storytelling in an indie way, in a no budget way, is really encouraging and actually like more instructive than the Cronenberg all powerful god.
Well, he in his defense,
he started off definitely making. I mean, Crimes of the Future, his original one, is absolutely mind blowing, and also it is also using a lot of effects too.
Yeah, so, and Shivers was a very early one that obviously those weren't worms, but you're close enough.
Have you seen the original Crimes of the Future, like stereo?
I have not. I've only seen occasional snippets of Cronenberg, but I'm sure the opportunity exists out there for me to remedy this one.
It's very simple effects that he's using, where it's just like foaming at the mouth, but it feels like so visceral. It's really cool.
Oh yeah. I've certainly seen a good deal of lower budget horror from the second half of the 70s through the late 80s. So I definitely have witnessed a lot of the practical low budget and getting eliciting an emotion on the cheap, and I don't mean that to sound as insulting as it might, but it's obviously a challenge for any up-and-comer or even people who have been in that field for a while, since while there is an audience for this, it's not a nationwide sized audience. But yes, Cronenberg obviously has humble beginnings, much the same way like Sam Raimi had his humble beginnings, and so fingers crossed that this will be your humble beginnings, and 10 years from now, more people will be knocking on your door to chat. So let me just take a quick look at my watch here. So it's been talking about this for a bit. I was wondering if you might speak briefly on your inspiration. You hinted at it a couple times that this was a sort of therapy project for you.
Yeah, I'd say that's more offensive than calling it on the cheap. No, it definitely. No, it's not therapy, but it is a reflection of like my experience with being clinically psychotic. So I had, there's like a line that Benny says where he's like, wards, time spent in wards. And like it's like me. Some of this stuff came from me experiencing things that feel like I'm tripping on worms or something. So that's I joke that it's autobiography, but at a certain point, it's like expressionist autobiography. That was my intention. Once the it's been 3 years with this movie, so growing it with collaborators like Ben and Troy, it grows beyond my own personal narrative. It becomes our personal narrative in that way. Where that's why it's been such a successful thing. Is we all like I took this as a personal story to all my collaborators, and we all like kind of like can recognize ourselves in this thing and grow it into the monstrosity that people seem to like a lot.
Yeah, there was. I definitely heard a lot of people saying good things about it, and secondhand, I heard some people not praising it as highly as I might prefer. But I imagine you knew going into this, probably from the very start, that there wouldn't be much middling emotion about this film that you all put together.
Yeah.
And I think that reflects, on your parts, a particular kind of drive and dedication in that you wanted to make your vision, and first and foremost, this movie is for you and your collaborators. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really touchy subject to, especially I think in film, to be like, this movie is not for a mass audience because it's really hard work and really expensive to make a movie. But we're playing with our a really small budget, and the whole reason we got into this game of making films is to make films that we actually like give a shit about, and inspired by the work that we love in previous directors and previous films, and and taking that knowledge and making a movie based off of our experience and the stuff that we love. That's the whole point in making work. So yeah.
Much more eloquently phrased than what I managed to come up with. Thank you for that. I'll see if I can edit myself out after this and just go right to that wonderful gem there. Now, I think I will wrap this up for the time being, but before I do, there's one question I like to ask everyone I interview. If you care to tell our listeners who will be out there your hometown and a restaurant that you can recommend there. We'll start with Special Effects Wiz.
Okay, cool. I'm come from South Lake, Texas, and I'd like to recommend the burger place Johnny B's. And should I say Chicago?
Yeah, I don't know.
I grew up in South Lake, Texas. I lived in Chicago for like 12 years. That's where we made the movie. Chicago, I love the Chicago diner, man.
Okay.
Honestly, I was just spacing out and trying to think.
Yeah.
I wasn't judging you at all.
But yeah, whatever you consider hometown, whether adopted or original.
I feel like I'm like just like a Midwest kid. I was born in Cleveland and then and grew up there, and then I moved to St. Louis for high school, and I went to college in Iowa, and then now I'm in Chicago. And I really like the hot dogs you get at like Home Depot. They're really good.
I didn't know there were Home Depot hot dogs.
Yeah, Depot dogs are great.
Is that okay? Because I'm from
they might have them
Northeast.
They might have them anywhere there's a Home Depot, there might be a Depot dog. So
okay, because I guess I'm not in those places much. Depot dogs anywhere, good. Well, that makes it more ubiquitous, easier for people to find them.
Yeah, I think I'm going to choose Chicago because the rest gets complicated. Because I was born in Dallas, but I was only there until I was 7. And then my parents, working with this nonprofit, we moved to Zambia and Southern Africa, and I was there 7 to 18. But in terms of, I've been in Chicago since 2013. And one of my favorite Chicago places is like this place, Alice and Friends Kitchen. Just an idea, I have a lot of variety of stuff. Yeah.
Whoa, okay, cool. That's really cool. Well, thank you all very much, and an extra special thank you to Kayla, who not only helped bring this film here, but also provided her hotel room for us to have better recording space. So thank you, Kayla.
Thanks, Kayla.
And if you have the opportunity, whenever that presents itself, whoever is listening to my voice right now, I strongly advise you seek out All Jacked Up and Full of Worms. It did debut only yesterday, so it might be a bit before it's in civilian hands, but fingers crossed that it gets out soon. So thanks again from 366, and it was great talking with you all.
Thanks, Giles.
Thank you,
Thank
Giles.
you.